The massive sensor array of Imperial Station Omega-7 stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced metal and crystalline components, its countless instruments constantly sweeping the dark void between distant star systems. Commander Velthor stood at the central command platform, his forearms moving with practiced efficiency across the holographic controls that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat over the past 30 years. The station operated in perfect routine, just as it had every day since his assignment began. Automated scanners methodically cataloged every grain of space dust, every drifting asteroid, every scheduled merchant vessel that passed through their monitored sector. The gentle hum of machinery created a soothing backdrop to what had become the most predictable job in the entire Galactic Empire. Velthor reviewed the morning reports with the same methodical attention he had shown for decades. Cargo freighter Deltanine had passed through on schedule, the mining operation in the Kepler Belt was proceeding normally. 3 patrol vessels had reported nothing unusual during their sweep of the outer perimeter. Everything was exactly as it should be in the well-ordered universe of Imperial space. Then the alarms began to scream with a piercing intensity that made every technician in the command center freeze in terror. Senior Technician Morden, young officer who had joined the station crew only 6 months earlier, nearly fell from his monitoring station as warning lights bathed the entire command center in pulsing red. His voice cracked with the kind of urgency that Velthor had not heard in 3 decades of service. "Commander, we have an unidentified contact approaching Sector 77 Alpha. The readings they're completely impossible." Velthor's scaled fingers, each one ending in a sharp claw that could operate the most delicate instruments, moved across the control interface with lightning speed. The readings that appeared on his personal display made absolutely no sense according to everything he knew about physics, engineering, and the fundamental laws that govern space travel throughout the known galaxy. The vessel's velocity readings fluctuated wildly between numbers that suggested impossible speeds, the kind of acceleration that should have crushed any living crew into paste against the bulkheads of their ship. The energy signature was equally baffling, displaying patterns that matched no known propulsion system, no recorded power source, and no technology that existed in any Imperial database. "Run a full archive scan immediately," Velthor commanded, his voice steady, despite the growing knot of concern in his stomach. "Cross-reference with all known ship designs from the past 50 millennia. Include civilian vessels, military prototypes, experimental craft, and even theoretical designs that were never built. The massive computer systems of Imperial Station." Omega-7 began processing the request, drawing upon databases that contained detailed information about every spacecraft ever constructed by any of the 47 member species of the Galactic Empire. The quantum processors worked at speeds that could analyze millions of designs in mere seconds, comparing energy signatures, structural patterns, and propulsion characteristics. Minutes passed in tense silence as every technician in the command center stared at their displays, waiting for the computer to identify the mysterious vessel. The archive contained information spanning 50,000 years of galactic civilization, including records of ships built by species that had been extinct for millennia. The computer's response appeared on the main display, in letters that seemed to glow with ominous significance. "No match found." Velthor felt a chill run through his entire body. In 50,000 years of recorded galactic history, every single spacecraft had been cataloged, studied, and filed away in the Imperial archives. The computer had never, not once, failed to identify a vessel. The very concept of an unidentified ship was so impossible that there were no protocols for dealing with such a situation. The mysterious vessel continued its approach toward Imperial space, seemingly unaware that it had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. It moved through the void with a casual confidence that suggested its crew had no idea they were making history by becoming the first truly unknown ship in recorded galactic civilization. Morden's voice interrupted the commander's thoughts barely, above a whisper, but carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet command center. "Sir, it's transmitting something. It's audio only, using standard galactic communication frequencies." Velthor nodded grimly and activated the communication system. The entire command center fell silent as they prepare to hear the first words from this impossible vessel. A calm, friendly voice filled the command center, speaking in perfectly clear galactic standard language with an accent that no one could identify. This is Captain Hyan Wu of the Earth Vessel Determination. We are approaching your station and respectfully request permission to dock for peaceful communication and possible trade discussions. The words hit Velthair like a physical blow. Quickly access the Imperial star charts, searching frantically through thousands of systems and millions of cataloged worlds. The result was the same as the ship scan. No match found. Earth was not listed in any star charts, had never been mentioned in any diplomatic correspondence, and appeared in no historical records. The implications were staggering. An unknown ship from an unknown world, operated by an unknown species, had somehow appeared in Imperial space without any record of how they had learned galactic languages or obtained communication technology compatible with Imperial systems. Velthor realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was about to change forever. Ambassador Kralanos adjusted her ceremonial robes as she stepped onto the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. Her long career in the Imperial diplomatic corps had earned her respect throughout the galaxy, and for good reason. She had successfully negotiated peace treaties with warrior species, established trade agreements with isolationist cultures, and managed the delicate process of bringing new civilizations into the Empire's fold. The ambassador's personal records showed an impressive list of achievements. She had made first contact with the crystalline Veltari, whose communication required precise light patterns. She had successfully negotiated with the gaseous Nethmer, who spoke through controlled atmospheric pressure changes. Her most challenging assignment had been the insectoid Zikthar, whose language consisted entirely of chemical signals that took months to decode. Each successful first contact had followed the same careful procedures. The Imperial Diplomatic Manual contained exactly 473 pages of protocols, covering every possible scenario from peaceful greeting to hostile encounter. Kralanos had memorized every single page and had never once deviated from the established procedures. The diplomatic fleet took position around the mysterious human vessel, maintaining the precise formation that had proven successful for countless generations. 5 heavy cruisers created a protective perimeter, while 3 specialized communication ships positioned themselves at optimal distances for signal transmission. The flagship Harmony's Edge occupied the center position, its massive sensor arrays focused on the strange craft that had appeared from nowhere. Kralanos studied the alien vessel through the main view screen and felt a mixture of fascination and concern. The ship's design was unlike anything in the Imperial archives. Its hull appeared to be made of some unknown metal that seemed to bend and shift light around its surface, creating an almost mirror-like effect that made it difficult to determine the vessel's exact size and shape. The craft showed no obvious weapons systems, no defensive shields, and no recognizable propulsion units. Yet somehow, it maintained position effortlessly in the void, as if the normal laws of physics had no effect. On its operation, energy readings were equally mysterious, showing power levels that fluctuated in patterns that made no scientific sense. Following standard protocol, Kralanos ordered her communications team to begin the formal first contact sequence. The primary communications officer, a skilled linguist named Telvin, activated the transmission systems and began broadcasting the standard greeting in the most common galactic languages. The transmission started with mathematical sequences designed to prove intelligence and peaceful intent. Prime numbers, geometric proofs, and basic physics equations were sent in carefully structured patterns that any advanced civilization should recognize. This was followed by simple pictographs showing the concept of friendship, trade, and mutual. The communications team then began transmitting the greeting in 47 different languages, starting with the most widely spoken tongues in the galaxy. Each language was carefully pronounced by native speakers who had been specially trained for first contact situations. The transmission included basic concepts like peace, friendship, and the desire for communication. The response came so quickly that it caught the entire diplomatic team off guard. Instead of the careful, measured reply that typically followed hours of analysis and preparation, the human vessel immediately transmitted a clear audio message in perfect galactic standard language. "Hello there, I'm Captain Hyenwoo.
This is
My science officer, Dr. So Young, and our engineer, Lieutenant Jin Ho. We're from Earth, about 12,000 light years in that direction. Nice to meet you." The casual tone of the message sent shockwaves through the diplomatic team. Ambassador Krelonos felt her carefully constructed mental preparation begin to crumble. The humans were speaking as if they were greeting neighbors over a backyard fence, not making first contact with representatives of a galactic empire that controlled thousands of worlds. The ambassador quickly consulted her protocols and found herself in completely uncharted territory. Nothing in her training had prepared her for aliens who seemed completely unconcerned about the massive diplomatic significance of their meeting. They spoke with the relaxed confidence of people who encountered new species every day. "We don't have any records of your species in our databases," Krelonos transmitted carefully, following the standard procedure for dealing with unknown civilizations. The response should have been formal acknowledgement and a request for permission to exchange basic information. Instead, the cheerful voice of Captain Hyenwoo filled the communication channel again. "That's perfectly okay. We don't have records of yours either. So Young here is absolutely fascinated by your ship designs. They're much more elegant than anything we've seen before. Mind if we exchange some basic information? We promise we're friendly." In the background, Krelonos could hear the excited chatter of Dr. So Young, who was apparently commenting on the Imperial fleet's formation and making observations about their technology. The science officer's enthusiasm was infectious, and her rapid-fire questions about propulsion, systems, and hull composition were clearly audible through the open communication channel that the ambassador realized with growing alarm that these humans weren't following any first contact protocols at all. They had no formal procedures, no careful diplomatic language, and no apparent concern about the potential dangers of meeting an unknown civilization. They were simply talking, as if first contact was the most natural thing in the universe. Lieutenant Jinho's voice joined the conversation, politely asking technical questions about the Imperial ship's engineering systems. The humans seemed genuinely curious about everything they were seeing, approaching the situation with the enthusiasm of tourists rather than the caution of explorers. Meeting potentially dangerous aliens, Krelonos found herself completely unprepared for species that treated impossible situations as merely interesting conversations waiting to happen. The merchant convoy had been traveling through what Imperial authorities considered one of the safest shipping lanes in the galaxy. Captain Feldar of the cargo vessel Prosperity had made this journey dozens of times without incident, carrying valuable minerals from the outer mining colonies to the industrial centers of the core worlds. The route was well patrolled, clearly marked, protected by automated defense systems that had deterred pirates for over a century. The convoy consisted of 12 massive cargo ships, each one carrying enough raw materials to supply an entire planetary manufacturing complex. Their hulls were reinforced against asteroid impacts and space debris, but they were not built for combat. The ships moved slowly through space, their massive engines designed for efficiency rather than speed or maneuverability. Admiral Dekmaras' patrol fleet maintained a protective formation around the merchant vessels, though more out of tradition than necessity. The admiral had been escorting convoys for 20 years and had never encountered anything more dangerous than a malfunctioning navigation beacon. His 3 cruisers and 5 escort vessels were perfectly adequate for dealing with the occasional smuggler or lost tourist. The attack came from absolutely nowhere, striking with the kind of precision that could only come from careful planning and perfect timing. 16 sleek vessels dropped out of hyperspace in a coordinated assault formation, their black hulls decorated with the crimson lightning bolt that marked them as members of the infamous Crimson Fleet. The pirate ships were built for speed and destruction, with powerful weapon systems and advanced shielding that made them nearly impossible to track until they were already in attack position. Their leader, Captain Verkesh, had built a reputation for ruthless efficiency and total destruction of any convoy that crossed his path. The merchant ships immediately began emergency procedures, trying to scatter and reach the safety of the nearest Imperial patrol station. But the pirates had chosen their ambush point perfectly, cutting off all escape routes and jamming long-range communications. The cargo vessels were sitting targets, unable to fight back against the superior firepower of the Crimson Fleet. Admiral Deckmer ordered his fleet to defensive positions, knowing that his small force would be overwhelmed by the pirates' numbers and superior technology. Imperial protocol required him to protect the merchant ships at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing his own vessels in the process, Captain. Hyenwoo's response was immediate and completely unexpected. The human vessel Determination, which had been traveling alongside the convoy as an observer, suddenly changed course and accelerated toward the attacking pirates. Determination to merchant vessels. "We're moving to assist," came the calm voice. Over the communication channel, Admiral Deckmar felt his blood freeze as he realized what the humans were planning. "Negative," he transmitted urgently, his voice filled with desperation. "You're outnumbered 8-1. Our reinforcements are 40 minutes away." The human captain's response was delivered in the same calm, conversational tone that had characterized all their previous communications. "Understood," came the reply. "Saw Young, what do you think about those shield frequencies? Can you reroute power from the secondary systems?" What followed completely destroyed everything that Admiral Deckmer and his crew thought they knew about space combat, physics, and the fundamental limitations of spacecraft engineering. The human vessel didn't retreat to a safe distance, didn't call for backup, didn't hesitate for even a moment. Instead, it simply began to adapt to the situation in ways that seemed to defy all logic. The pirates concentrated their fire on the Determination, expecting to disable or destroy the single ship quickly before returning to their primary targets. Their weapons struck the human vessel's shields with enough force to cripple an Imperial cruiser. But somehow the small ship continued to function. When the pirates targeted the Determination's engines with a concentrated barrage that should have left the ship dead in space, Lieutenant Jinho somehow maintained power by rerouting energy through what he cheerfully described as the coffee maker's heating element. The human engineer performed modifications to his ship's systems in real time, adapting to damage as quickly as it occurred. Dr. So-Young's voice could be heard over the communication channel, calmly discussing weapon targeting solutions while the ship shook under enemy fire. When the Determination's weapons began to overheat from continuous use, a science officer recalibrated the targeting systems using what she described as some quick math, apparently solving complex ballistics equations in her head while dodging enemy fire. The most impressive display came when the ship's shields finally failed under the concentrated assault of multiple pirate vessels. Instead of accepting defeat, Captain Hyenwoo simply began flying so aggressively that the pirates couldn't maintain target locks on his ship. The Determination twisted and spun through space in patterns that should have crushed the crew from the acceleration forces. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When Admiral Deckmer's reinforcements finally arrived, expecting to find the wreckage of the human vessel and the destruction of the merchant convoy, they instead discovered something unprecedented. In Imperial military history, the entire pirate fleet was disabled, their ships drifting powerless in space. The humans were calmly transmitting medical supplies and repair instructions to the surviving pirates, treating their former enemies with the same casual friendliness they had shown during first contact. Admiral Deckmer could only transmit a single word, "How?" Captain Hyenwoo's response was delivered with characteristic modesty. "Ginho's really good with repairs, and Sa-Young reads a lot." The Imperial War Council chamber was a magnificent structure built from pure crystalline formations that had been grown over centuries in the heart of the Empire's capital world. The massive room could accommodate representatives from all 47 member species of the Galactic Empire, but today only the most senior military leaders and intelligence officials had been summoned for what was being called the most classified meeting in Imperial history. The crystalline table at the center of the chamber reflected the worried faces of 12 different species as they reviewed classified reports that had been flooding in from across the galaxy. General Morthic, a veteran warrior whose scaled hide bore the scars of countless battles, shifted nervously in his seat as he studied the impossible data before him. Intelligence Chief Varkith, whose 4 eyes could process information faster than most computer systems, stood to address the assembled leaders. Her voice carried the weight of decades spent analyzing threats to Imperial security. But today, there was something different in her tone, an uncertainty that had never been present before. We have confirmed the presence of 17 additional human vessels operating in various sectors throughout Imperial space, she reported, her usually steady voice betraying hints of confusion. Each vessel is completely unique in design, showing no standardization or common manufacturing patterns. More disturbing, each one has been observed performing feats that our best scientists consider physically impossible. The holographic display system activated automatically, filling the center of the chamber with three-dimensional images of the human ships that had been detected. The vessels showed incredible variety in size, shape, and apparent function. Some were sleek and streamlined. Others appeared to be cobbled together from salvaged components, and a few seemed to defy basic principles of aerodynamics and structural engineering. Fleet Commander Zephtile, whose military career spanned 40 years of service across the galaxy, activated his personal control interface. His expression was grim as he prepared to share intelligence that challenged everything the Empire thought it knew about warfare and technology. "The humans don't just fight differently than any species we've encountered," he began, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose fundamental beliefs had been shaken. "They think differently. They approach problems from angles that our tactical computers can't even calculate. Watch this analysis from the Kepler sector." The holographic display shifted to show a massive space creature that had been terrorizing commercial shipping lanes for over 6 months. The beast was nearly 2 kilometers long. The natural armor plating that could deflect military-grade weapons and tentacles that could crush a cruiser's hull. Imperial forces had attempted to destroy the creature using conventional tactics, but their weapons had proven ineffective against its natural defenses. The recording showed the human vessel, Phoenix, approaching the creature without any visible weapon systems activated. Instead of engaging in combat, the ship began transmitting what appeared to be mathematical sequences and harmonic frequencies. The creature responded by changing its aggressive behavior, becoming curious rather than hostile. "They talked to it," Zephtile continued, his voice filled with disbelief. "The humans somehow established communication with a non-sentient space beast that our xenobiologists classified as purely instinctual. They convinced the creature to follow them into the Vega Nebula, where the natural electromagnetic fields had a calming effect on its nervous system." The display showed the creature peacefully swimming through the nebula's glowing gases, no longer a threat to shipping but apparently content in its new environment. The human ship had solved a problem that had required 3 Imperial fleet deployments. By simply talking to the threat and finding it a better home, War Minister Drexahan, whose strategic mind had planned successful campaigns against dozens of hostile species, leaned forward with evident concern. "The pattern is consistent across every encounter we've documented. When faced with impossible odds, overwhelming enemy forces, or situations that should require massive resource allocation, they don't retreat or call for support. They improvise." Chief Scientist Yulmer activated another section of the display, showing detailed technical analysis of human technology. "Their equipment appears to be decades behind ours in terms of materials science, power generation, and manufacturing precision, yet they consistently outperform our best military hardware. They seem to upgrade and modify their systems during active combat situations." The display showed frame-by-frame analysis of the battle with the Crimson Fleet pirates. The human vessel had reconfigured its internal systems 17 times during the engagement, adapting to damage and changing tactical requirements in real time. Each modification had been performed manually by the crew, without computer assistance or predetermined procedures. "Look at this energy rerouting pattern," Yulmer continued, highlighting specific sections of the ship's power grid. "They used a food preparation device to maintain engine power after their primary systems were damaged. Our engineers spent 3 days analyzing the modification and still can't understand how it worked." General Morthic spoke for the first time during the meeting, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of someone who had fought in more battles than anyone else in the room. "In my entire career, I have never encountered a species that treats impossibility as merely another problem to solve. They don't seem to understand that certain things cannot be done. The council chamber fell into complete silence as the implications of the human presence began to sink in. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had expanded through careful planning, superior technology, and overwhelming force. Every species they had encountered had operated within predictable parameters, following logical patterns that could be analyzed and countered. The humans represented something completely new, a species that seemed to thrive on chaos, improvisation, and the fundamental belief that any problem could be solved with enough creativity and determination. The stellar cascade phenomenon began as a minor gravitational anomaly in the Theta sector, but within hours it had grown into something that threatened to destroy entire star systems. The cascade worked like a chain reaction, where the gravitational collapse of one star triggered instabilities in nearby stellar bodies, creating a wave of destruction that moved through space at incredible speed. Imperial scientists had been tracking the phenomenon for weeks, watching helplessly as their most advanced computer models predicted catastrophic outcomes. The cascade was heading directly toward for heavily populated Imperial worlds, each one home to hundreds of millions of citizens who had built their lives around the stable light of their suns. The evacuation effort was the largest in Imperial history, involving thousands of transport ships working around the clock to move 2 billion people to safety. Massive cargo vessels that normally carried industrial equipment were hastily converted to passenger ships, while military transports abandoned their normal duties to join the rescue operation. Commander Velthor coordinated the evacuation from the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dawn, watching the constant stream of reports from his rescue teams. The numbers were overwhelming, even with every available ship working at maximum capacity. The Empire's best estimates suggested that at least 40% of the population would be trapped when the cascade reached their worlds. Chief Physicist Mortel had spent sleepless days trying to find a solution, running calculations on the most powerful computers in the Empire. His team had explored every possible approach, from using massive explosions to disrupt the cascade to attempting to create artificial gravitational fields that might redirect the phenomenon. Every single approach had failed. The energy requirements were simply too enormous for any technology the Empire possessed. The cascade was too massive, too powerful, and too fast for any conventional solution to work. Then Captain Hyenwoo's voice came over the communication channel with a message that was both simple and completely unexpected. We'd like to help. The human vessel Determination had been observing the evacuation efforts from a respectful distance, but now it moved closer to the Imperial flagship. Captain Hyenwoo's offer was polite but firm, delivered in the same calm tone that had characterized all their previous communications. Commander Velthar felt a mixture of gratitude and skepticism. The humans had proven themselves capable of remarkable feats, but the stellar cascade was beyond anything they had faced before. It was a phenomenon that threatened entire star systems, not something that could be solved with clever engineering and creative thinking. Nevertheless, the commander found himself being transported to the Determination's compact bridge, where he was amazed to discover that Dr. Saw Young had already begun working on the problem. The human science officer had somehow interfaced Imperial sensor data with her own computer systems, using what appeared to be spare parts, improvised cables, and an impressive amount of determination. The human bridge was cramped compared to Imperial standards, but it buzzed with activity as the crew worked on their analysis. Dr. So-Young was surrounded by displays showing complex gravitational models, while Lieutenant Jinho was elbow-deep in a tangle of components that seemed to combine human and Imperial technology in ways that should have been impossible. The cascade is caused by gravitational resonance, Dr. So-Young explained excitedly to the Imperial scientists who had joined them. Her enthusiasm was infectious as she pointed to the various displays showing the cascade structure. If we can disrupt the pattern at 3 specific points simultaneously, we might be able to break the chain reaction. Chief Physicist Mortel studied the humans' calculations with growing amazement. Her approach was completely different from anything his team had considered, focusing on the cascade's harmonic properties rather than its raw energy. But when he ran the numbers, the results were discouraging. The energy requirements would still exceed our entire fleet's output, he declared, his voice heavy with disappointment. We would need to generate the equivalent of a stellar explosion at each disruption point. Lieutenant Jinho looked up from his tangle of cables and components, his face covered with the kind of grease and dust that came from hands-on engineering work. Maybe we don't try to stop it, he suggested thoughtfully. What if we redirect it instead? What followed was the most chaotic scientific collaboration in Imperial history. The humans began jury-rigging equipment in ways that made Imperial engineers wince with concern. They bypassed safety protocols, combined technologies that had never been designed to work together, and created solutions that seemed to violate basic principles of physics. Dr. Soyun connected Imperial gravitational sensors to human computers using what appeared to be kitchen utensils and spare wire. Jinho modified Imperial energy projectors with components from the ship's recycling system. Captain Haiyan-Wu coordinated the effort while simultaneously piloting his ship through gravitational fields that should have crushed the hull. The Imperial scientists watched in fascination and horror as the humans worked. Every modification they made should have caused catastrophic system failures, but somehow everything continued to function. The humans seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how different technologies could be combined, even when those combinations made no logical sense. The plan they developed was elegantly simple. Instead of trying to stop the cascade's enormous energy, they would redirect it into empty space, where it could harmlessly dissipate. The key was creating precisely timed gravitational pulses that would nudge the cascade away from the populated systems. The execution required split-second timing and coordination between dozens of ships. The humans worked alongside Imperial crews, sharing their improvised modifications and teaching Imperial engineers how to bypass their own safety systems. When the moment came, the combined fleet fired their modified weapons in perfect synchronization. The cascade's path shifted by just a few degrees, but it was enough. The wave of destruction curved away from the populated worlds and headed toward empty space. Later, as the combined fleet watched the spectacular but harmless light show in the distance, Admiral Velthar approached Captain Haiyan-Wu with a question that had been troubling him. Your species doesn't accept defeat, do you? Haiyan-Wu smiled with the quiet confidence that seemed to characterize all humans. We have a saying on Earth, the impossible just takes a little longer. We've found that most problems have solutions, if you're willing to try. Velthar realized that the Empire's fear had been completely misplaced. Humans weren't dangerous because they were hostile or aggressive. They were dangerous because they had never learned that some things were impossible, and their stubborn refusal to accept limitations made them capable of achieving miraculous results. The formal invitation to Earth was transmitted the next day. Though the Empire still wasn't entirely sure they were ready for humanity's unique brand of helpful chaos. The silence that followed Captain Kim Daeho's galaxy-wide transmission was unlike anything the Empire had ever experienced. On 1,000 different worlds, from the wealthy core planets to the distant frontier colonies, billions of beings sat, in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just heard. The impossible had become reality. A single human warship had penetrated the most secure defenses in the galaxy and delivered a message that would change everything. Admiral Roll. Welther stood motionless on the bridge of Nexus Prime, his 6 eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed the human vessel's position. A single blip on his screen represented everything he had believed about warfare and military superiority being proven wrong. For 3 centuries, no enemy had ever gotten this close to the Empire's heart. The defensive systems that protected this station had been considered perfect, unbreakable barriers that would stop any attack. A datapad lay on the command table beside him, containing Chief Science Advisor Morgan's latest analysis of human technological capabilities. The report painted a picture that terrified even the most experienced military commanders. The humans had not simply stolen Empire technology and learned to use it. They'd completely rebuilt it, improved it, and combined it in ways that surpassed The original designs, according to our analysis, Morgan had written, the humans have reverse-engineered every major system we use. Their propulsion technology is now more efficient than ours. Their weapon systems have greater range and power. Their defensive screens can withstand attacks that would destroy our own ships. They have taken our greatest scientific achievements and made them better. The Admiral's hands trembled slightly as he read the report again. The Empire had always maintained its dominance through superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Their scientists had spent thousands of years developing the systems that kept them at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Now, a species that had been traveling in space for only a few centuries had surpassed them in every important area. On the Thunder's bridge, Captain Deho stood calmly at his position, waiting for the Empire's response. His crew continued their duties with quiet efficiency, understanding that they were witnessing a historic moment. The war that had begun with humanity fighting desperately for survival had transformed into something entirely different. Chief Engineer Lee Hai-jin monitored her instruments from the engineering deck, keeping watch over the systems that kept them invisible to enemy sensors. Captain, she reported through the communication system, all stealth systems are functioning perfectly. Power levels are stable. We can maintain this position for several more hours without any problems. The stealth technology that protected them was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining alien components in ways their original creators had never imagined. Every piece of equipment had been salvaged from the wreckage of destroyed Empire ships, studied by Earth's best scientists, and rebuilt to work better than the original designs. Captain, Communications Officer Choi Min-ho called out suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet atmosphere of the bridge. We are receiving a priority transmission from the Empire's High Command. The signal is coming directly from the Imperial Palace on the capital world. Deho turned toward the main viewing screen, his expression serious but calm. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, but instead of showing Admiral Velthar, a different figure appeared. Supreme Chancellor Kethmorin herself stood before the camera, her ancient features showing the weight of ruling an empire that spanned hundreds of star systems. She was the highest authority in the Galactic Empire, the being who made decisions that affected the lives of trillions of creatures across the galaxy. Her voice was carefully controlled, measured and diplomatic in a way that revealed how seriously she was taking this situation. Captain Kim Deho of the human vessel Thunder, your message has been received and analyzed by our government. After careful consideration, the Galactic Empire formally requests immediate negotiations to discuss the current conflict between our peoples. Dr. Yudongman smiled grimly as he listened to the Chancellor's words. 6 months of intense preparation, of studying captured alien technology and pushing human scientific capabilities to their limits, had led to this moment. The species that had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than a minor pest problem was now asking to negotiate as equals. Chancellor Kethmorin Deho replied, his voice respectful but firm. Humanity accepts your request for negotiations. However, I want you to understand something very important. We are no longer the same species you chose to attack 6 months ago. We are the species you created through your actions against us. The captain's words carried a weight that everyone, on both sides, understood. Humans had been transformed by the war, forced to grow stronger and more capable in order to survive. The Empire's attacks had not weakened them. It forged them into something far more dangerous. Lieutenant Park Soman watched her sensor displays as new contacts began to appear around their position. Empire warships were arriving from all directions, but something was different about their behavior. For the first time since the war began, the alien vessels maintained a respectful distance from the human ship. They formed a loose perimeter around the Thunder, made no aggressive moves. The change in the Empire's behavior was subtle but significant. These ships were not positioning themselves for an attack. They were taking defensive positions, showing that they now viewed humanity as a threat that required serious respect and caution. The galaxy had entered a new era. The humans had proven that raw, technological superiority was not enough to guarantee victory. What mattered was the ability to adapt, to learn from enemies, and to never give up, even when facing impossible odds. The Empire would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species they had accidentally transformed into their greatest challenge,